Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. This is your host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic downtown Oliver Springs, just outside of the Roane County border into Anderson County. Hope everybody is having a great Friday, and I hope you're enjoying this prime time broadcast of Tap Into the Truth here at Spreaker. Wanted to deal with a couple of issues. First of all, I'd like to remind everybody, if you are an iPad user, an iPhone user, an iDevice of any kind, if you subscribe to iTunes, guess what? Tap Into the Truth, both Spreaker and Blog Talk versions are available to download as podcast there, and I highly recommend you take the opportunity to sort through some of the older episodes, listen to the newer stuff, check out the evolution of a talk show host, seeing me from my very raw beginnings where I could barely keep time, to now slowly becoming a bit more polished and sounding a little more like somebody you expect to hear on the radio. Although, I'll be the first to admit it, sitting here with my Heritage Foundation hat on and my Hillsdale pen firmly in grip, I'm still got a ways to go. In the meanwhile, wanted to also touch base. If you did not get an opportunity to listen to last night's broadcast, Ready for the Real World, I highly recommend you go back on the Spreaker homepage here. Check out last night's broadcast. Made national headlines and breaking the Twitter accounts, as last night we stepped away from politics for a minute and talked about what it takes to help get young kids who are leaving high school, either through graduation or because they're dropping out, who will not be entering college, trying to get them ready to go out and find a job. We touched on some of that, and I issued a challenge, but the online newspaper, the NRWA Daily, has last night's broadcast as one of their featured stories. And it's certainly always nice to know that people that are trying to spread the word are paying attention. They promote a lot of resume writing services, and they deal specifically with folks trying to help people to get a job. And trust me, right now, especially in this economy, if you're looking for a job, there is no better investment of your time than learning the best way to write a resume, the best way to present yourself for interviews, the best way to go and pick up your applications. We talked briefly about some of that, and we also primarily talked about an article that was in Forbes magazine, 20 Things That 20-Year-Olds Don't Get. Talked in depth about the 20 points mentioned in the article, which is designed to be basically advice to help you improve your career path. That was the whole idea. That was designed primarily, though, for people that already have a job. My contention, based on what I see daily as part of the management team of a food production company who deals with the majority of the hiring, we see a lot of people coming in and making those first impressions to pick up applications, to drop off applications, or who come into interviews and they don't do the best job of presenting themselves. They're not making a very good first impression. So I'm challenging everyone out there who happens to be a mentor of some kind or who can mentor, everyone who has been an entrepreneur, everyone who's been a hiring manager, everyone who's been a shift leader and had to recommend somebody for a job, to get involved in your community and start helping these kids have a better idea of what they need to do in order to get a job. That was the primary crux of last night. It's something that I plan on starting a project of my own. I'm going to start doing some of the reaching out within my contact network this very weekend to start building that up. And if any of you listening tonight happen to be local and are interested in helping me with that, go ahead and send me a message, contact me. If you're working along those lines already and would like to be a guest on a future episode, contact me and we will set you up for a Blog Talk broadcast, which is much easier for me to get guests on and off the air there. While we're on the topic of Blog Talk, I mentioned previously that I'd been kind of shadowing the Spreaker shows to the Blog Talk shows over the last little bit. That is changing from this point forward. We're going to be doing more here on Spreaker, maybe even upgrading to a larger time slot, but at the moment I'm still content with 45 minutes here. Still doing the 2-hour bit over on Blog Talk. We have a show scheduled this Sunday. We start at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tap into the Truth Blog Talk. This upcoming, we're talking about some media bias, and we're talking specifically about the story of a 13-year-old girl in Austin, Texas, who was gang raped by a group of illegal immigrants, most of them from Mexico, and the mainstream media is just sleeping on this story. They don't want to talk about it. And why do they not want to talk about it? Because it doesn't fit the agenda. That's easy enough to see. That's easy enough to figure. If this had been white guys who had basically snatched this kid off the street and did it, they'd be reporting it like crazy. There were at least 10 men at this apartment. And then, after she gets away from them, the first people she goes to get help, well, the woman picks her up, takes her to their apartment, and there she's sexually assaulted again. Now, I don't know what's going on. Last time I was in Texas, everybody was pretty freaking nice. So I don't understand what is going on here. But I really wish we had decency and honesty going on in the media, because this is a story that should be making national headlines and should not be at the sole discretion of the alternative news sources, such as conservative news websites, Lady Patriots, TeaPartyCommunity.com, Tap Into the Truth, a boatload of fine hosts over at Blog Talk that I am building my network with daily. It should not be up to us to get these kinds of stories out, because this is a horrible, horrible thing. This girl managed to survive. This girl managed to get through, and she is experiencing a great deal of trauma, but she survived. I'm sure she wished she wasn't, but she is. What I wish is that we got fairness and equality through the media. They're still going on and trying to stir up issues over the Trayvon Martin shooting. But they won't mention this story because it was a little white girl and because she was assaulted by illegals. Now, that interferes with immigration reform, doesn't it? Why would there be resistance to immigration reform as they insist on calling it? All it is amnesty. Well, because if the people realized the kind of people that are going to be benefiting from this, there would be more public resistance. Now, that's not to say that all illegal immigrants are criminals, other than the fact, of course, that they're breaking the law by being here in the first place. Let me clarify. That's not to say all illegal immigrants are violent criminals, because they're not. A lot of them are hard-working, decent enough folks that ignored our laws and tried to build themselves a better life. I can understand it. I still can't forgive it. There's a right way to go about coming here. Do it the right way. That's all I ask. Anybody who wants to come here and earn a living to improve their life, if they're doing something that most Americans won't, fine. You're welcome to it. I'm not going to argue with you. If you come here because you want to become an American, even better. I welcome you with open arms, and I don't care where you're coming from. If you legitimately want to become an American citizen and you want to embrace everything that makes America great, welcome to the United States. Let me help you. On the subject of the Trayvon Martin shooting, tonight's broadcast titled, "Why Would You Care What Jay-Z Thinks?" Well, why would I ask that question? Well, recently Jay-Z has gotten very vocal about his feelings involving the George Zimmerman verdict. He seems to think that it's nothing but straight-up racism. And in fact, he's been quoted as saying that he sees a conspiracy afoot. A lot of white people were trying intentionally to keep him free. Well, yeah, that not so much a conspiracy, Jay-Z. What that was is a lot of people that saw a travesty of justice in the fact that they ignored standard operating procedure in criminal proceedings. I'm sure even you, with your limited knowledge of the judicial system, understand that the grand jury is typically involved in almost every capital crime case. They ignored the grand jury in this place because they didn't have enough evidence to get an indictment. They didn't want you to think they weren't doing their job of placating the crowd, the job of keeping the mobs at bay, when they went ahead and arrested him. They picked him up, they arrested him, they put him on trial, and make no mistake, it was a show trial. It was a show trial so that they could rile up as many people as they could, because they knew they wouldn't get a conviction. They knew it was impossible if the jurors did what they were supposed to do. But just in case those jurors were too emotional, especially since they were mostly women, and you know how people think that women are overly emotional. In the event that these women were indeed overly emotional and ignored the law, they had the prosecution do just a horrible job of trying to prove their case. In fact, most of their witnesses proved the case the other way. They were helping Zimmerman. Now, is that where the conspiracy comes in? I promise you, Jay-Z, if that is indeed the conspiracy, nothing about that is helpful to Zimmerman, because George Zimmerman becomes a sacrificial lamb. George Zimmerman becomes somebody that's being served up to the public to be a villain, to be a bad guy, to be somebody that you can hate, but so that you'll demand new gun laws and new gun control. Sandy Hook wasn't enough. Now we need Trayvon Martin. So if there is a conspiracy, Jay-Z, you're looking at it the wrong way, because this was never about race until the race baiters made it that way. And really, Jay-Z, no disrespect. I'm not a particularly big fan of your music. Love a lot of what your wife does. But I'm not a critic of your music either. I don't listen to enough of it to know one way or the other. And I'll be straight up about it. I know who you are. I recognize you by name. I recognize your face. I've seen you about. And I know that you've weighed in on political issues before. I know you're running your agent, your sports agency, whatever you're calling it. I don't know enough details about that to go into much, except for the fact that I know some of the college folks you've talked to. The NCAA has been investigating whether or not your relationship's been inappropriate. Seems like you've tiptoed across that line and not crossed any lines and broken any rules. And I hope it stays that way. And I've heard you talk. You speak very eloquently. And you come from a place that's still very real for you. And you feel racism is still a serious part of your struggles on a daily basis. And sadly, what you're allowing to have happen here, Jay, is you're letting that paint your picture of everyone else's experiences. You automatically assume, because that's what you have happen to you, that's just the way it is everywhere. Well, that's just not the case. In this particular case, based on the 911 call, the unedited version, it sounds to me like Zimmerman had no idea what color Trayvon was until after he had been following him for a bit. And in the rain and wearing a dark hoodie, it's very conceivable that he may not have been able to tell if he was black, white, Hispanic, whatever. Now, Maybe that wasn't the case. I've said a million times, I don't know what happened that night. I wasn't there. And whether you're pro-Trayvon or pro-Zimmerman, you can rationalize all you want. You can make up as many theories as you want. But when it comes to the trial, you are supposed to follow the law. And even this juror number 3 who's come out, and I don't know what her motivations are. I hope she really is just trying to help herself feel better over her emotional state with it, like she claims. I do hope that she's not allowing herself to be used by either the media or a political machine that is still trying to gin up anger, to widen the divide between races in the nation for the purposes of gun control, for the purposes of keeping us divided, and for the purposes of providing distractions that can't be directly linked to this administration and the many atrocities that it's committed, starting with, but certainly not limited to, Benghazi, Fast and Furious, the NSA services, the spying on the reporters, the violation of almost every amendment and almost every statute of the Constitution. Let's talk about Trayvon Martin instead. Let's package the lie that he was an innocent child. He was 17, not 11 or 12, the way most of the pictures that the media intentionally showed out. My issue with this and the case has been with the media and its attempt to attack stand your ground laws. Now, I've been doing more research into how a lot of the stand your ground laws are written, and in the states that basically imply the Castle Doctrine, most of those are written in a way that I can live with. Basically, you still have a duty to retreat under most circumstances. But irregardless, the media and the politicians that are on board and pushing for the Trayvon Martin side of this story, they're packaging and lie to you because they want you to feel as sympathetic as you can so that you'll be supportive when they ask you to take your Second Amendment right away from you. And the reason they want to do that is because they don't want you thinking for a second that you have the right to self-defense. Because you're supposed to depend on the government for your defense. But let me ask you this. The reason I bring this up, I asked the question point blank, why would you care what Jay-Z thinks? Now, if you idolize Jay-Z and you're one of his little rap minions or big-time fan or whatever, then, yeah, you tend to care about what he has to say. And again, the man knows hip-hop. He knows his experience. He knows how to make some smart business moves. And he also knows that this particular case is much in the same way as it is for the Reverend Al Sharpton and the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a way to get your name out there and appear to be on the side of being down with the man. So he's smart enough to package himself and move that right along. I honestly believe, with all sincerity, that Jay-Z is sincere in believing what he's saying. That doesn't make him any less wrong. But what really bothers me is when I see so many conservatives getting all bent out of shape because Jay-Z's been making these statements. Because number one, he's not talking to you. Okay? You're not one of his little mindless followers. You're not one of his little brain-dead Jay-Zites. You know, you're thinking, you know what you feel. You may be on the completely other side of it, and I may not necessarily have much sympathy for you either and how you feel and what you think about this case. But the point is, he's not talking to you, so don't get bent out of shape about it. He's talking to whoever's willing to listen. Now, if you're willing to listen to him and pay any heed to him whatsoever, then heaven help you, because guess what? I am probably far better qualified to talk about the Zimmerman verdict than Jay-Z will ever be, because Jay-Z hasn't bothered to do any real research. I haven't done a whole lot, but I followed the case. I've talked to other people who followed it even closer, and I get to hear a lot of opinions, I get to hear a lot of facts, and I get to hear a lot of information. So, I come across a little more, I probably know more about it than he does. But Jay-Z is a smart businessman. And Jay-Z knows who his target audience is. Anytime you have somebody like Charles Barkley come out and say there wasn't enough evidence to convict, then that should settle it, because Charles Barkley, when I was younger, I loved watching him play. As I got older, I heard him make some very racist statements, and it kind of soured me on him personally. But knowing him, having followed him since his days at Auburn, I know that he has certainly become one of the less reasonable people that you're likely to come across, especially when it comes to race relations, or at least he has been in the past. But he made a very sound and poignant statement the other day. We actually played it on a previous broadcast, a soundbite. I don't have it queued up and ready to play here, although it almost seems appropriate that if I would have, because I think a lot of folks need to hear it again. But here's the thing. If you are a conservative, if you're not somebody that's following Jay-Z, if you're not a fan of his music, if you don't care about his political views, then why would you care what he's saying? Don't get bent out of shape. Let it go. This is just another celebrity trying to make himself seem a little more intelligent or a little more into the game, so to speak. But when you pay attention, when you let it get you riled up, when you let it get you angry enough that you start commenting back, well, then you're giving validity to his point of view. I've listened to some Jay-Z interviews, and I like a lot of what he has to say when it comes to wanting to help out. But I disagree with a lot of what he has to say, too, about how his time is charity, just like Obama. But the man is an Obama supporter. He's a Kool-Aid drinker, and he's politically on the left. And I don't know if he realizes that that's really detrimental to the very people he's trying to help or not. He may not be smart when it comes to the politics of the left. A lot of folks that support it aren't. I would very much like to be able to help educate folks on the left, to help bring them to a better understanding of why conservatism is a better mindset for everyone, and how there's nothing racist about being conservative. A lot of people have been convinced over time conservatives are racist automatically. That's not true. In fact, the only reason you occasionally catch conservatives making statements that then get twisted to sound like they're racist is because we spend, well, a large number of us spend so little time thinking in terms of race that we don't catch where the left would use certain phrases as code. Now, we've had to become more and more conscious of it, so fewer of us are falling into those traps. But if you find me, for example, saying something that you take offense to, I can almost guarantee you I probably didn't mean it that way, unless you're Muslim. I have said some things intentionally that you probably will find offensive, and I'm not backing off from any of those statements. No, that's not what today's about, though. I have received death threats for those statements. Nothing serious, nothing that I'm overly concerned about. I haven't had anybody showing up in my yard yet screaming Allah Akbar and shooting into my house. So I'm thinking, considering the time that's passed since the last one, that I'm probably safe. At least for the time being. But again, why? Why let yourself get so worked up? Don't give Jay-Z any more reason to be talked about. Don't put him back in the limelight. I'm breaking that very rule just by talking about him today. But in the context, I'm making the point that there's no reason to let what he has to say upset you any more than you should take what Ted Nugent says and plaster it all over your truck and drive around town with it. Ted Nugent is way conservative. He's a strong advocate for gun ownership rights, and he's weighed in on the Zimmerman thing too, but primarily based on celebrity reactions. I like a lot of what he has to say, but he's so over the top, it's hard to take him too seriously when he really gets fired up. But you know what? I have yet to find anybody passionate about anything that doesn't get fired up and doesn't occasionally get over the top. So I'm not criticizing Ted Nugent. I'm just saying that when it comes to what Ted Nugent has to say, it's no different than what Jay-Z has to say as far as how seriously you should take it. Neither one of these gentlemen are in a position to make policy. Neither one of these gentlemen are in a position to pass legislation. Neither one of these gentlemen are in a position to change how our laws are written or how they're enforced. And in both cases, that means that their opinions are exactly that, and they're no better or no worse than your opinion, my opinion, or Martha across the street here. Whoever can say whatever. Welcome to America. Freedom of speech is a great thing. My problem with both the Zimmerman verdict and the Trayvon Martin case from the beginning has been with the media portrayal. Jay-Z allowed the media to paint his thinking, and he's allowed the field in which he works to demonstrate to him and determine for him how he's supposed to think and feel about it. So he's got a set of things that he has to say regardless of how he really feels. And here's the real conundrum. That may not be how Jay-Z really feels. But as a hip-hop mogul, as a hip-hop artist, as somebody touring with Justin Timberlake, someone married to unquestionably one of the biggest R&B superstars of this and probably the next decade, he has a constituency and a following that would be angered by statements or feelings that went pro-Zimmerman in any fashion. So even if Jay-Z does believe fully in the rule of law, I know he's smart enough to understand what it takes to get a conviction. And I know he's smart enough to understand that a jury is supposed to put their personal feelings aside and follow the law. So in those cases, how could there have been any other verdict? There couldn't be. The case was crap. There was no evidence. Not anything that was telling. Not anything that was significant. All the evidence that existed either supported Zimmerman's story or was inconclusive. And a lot of people keep latching on to this inconclusive stuff and trying to say that proves that there was something else going on. But one of the star witnesses, a forensics expert, stated it best when he said that the absence of something proves nothing. You can have conjecture and you can come up with as many scenarios in your head as you want to, but it doesn't change anything. There wasn't enough evidence for a conviction, period. If Zimmerman stalked this kid and killed him in cold blood, or if Zimmerman got out of his car just to check the street signs, then was going back to his car, and Trayvon jumped him out of the blue, and the gun went off in the scuffle. Regardless of which one of those things happened, there was no evidence that supported a conviction of second-degree murder or even the manslaughter. Not under Florida law. So, why would you care what Jay-Z thinks? The answer is simple. If you're a Jay-Z fan, or if you're a hip-hop fan, if you're potentially a collegiate athlete that's got a real shot at becoming a professional athlete and you're considering letting Jay-Z represent you, or his agency represent you if he's not personally doing it. I don't know enough about his little sports agency to know if he's doing everything himself right now or if he's hired other agents to work for him yet. I don't know. I commend Jay-Z on his efforts to give back to his perceived community. I do not condone his efforts to try and make sure that his perceived community only includes black Americans. I question the judgment of any person who thinks that it's a good idea to honeymoon in Cuba. Cuba's a beautiful country. But the next time you think that Jay-Z's really down with you and that he understands your experience, understand Jay-Z has enough money that he can fly to Cuba. Do you? Most Americans these days, especially most Americans that think they relate to Jay-Z and the music that he portrays, probably couldn't afford to fly commercial to very many places. I know right now, if I was to need to fly to Chicago, for example, I would be hard-pressed to come up with the cash to get a ticket, and that's if I use one of these discount airlines. I'm guessing most of us out there would have more trouble than that. There are no commercial flights to Cuba. Only private airline capabilities to get there. He had to use a private plane. When you're married to Beyonce and you have millions of dollars of your own and millions upon millions of dollars of hers that you can pool together, you can do things like going to Cuba. So hey, that's great. I personally can think of a lot better places than Cuba to go spend my money. But the fact that he would choose Cuba as a honeymoon destination and that Beyonce was okay with it tells you all you need to know. If you're conservative, there's no reason for you to listen to this man. There's no reason for you to give any credence whatsoever to what he has to say. And on the topic of him seeing a conspiracy to protect Zimmerman, well, he's wrong. It's just that simple. He's not wrong because he's black. He's not wrong because he's a hip-hop artist. He's not wrong because he says things that kind of go through the filter of racism. He's wrong because it just doesn't meet the facts. If there was a conspiracy in this case, and I actually do kind of believe there is, it was a conspiracy that was designed to offer up Zimmerman as a sacrificial lamb and to create more racial tension and a distraction from the many scandals that Obama had the nerve to say this past week were all made up. Benghazi, made up. The IRS thing, made up. The GOP are making up these scandals, serve as a distraction to keep him, the occupier, from doing the important work that must be done. If there's a conspiracy, it's coming from the White House, the Department of Injustice, and certain MSNBC television hosts who need race baiting to keep themselves relevant. Jay-Z is a blip on the radar, barely. To his fans, he means something, but to the rest of us, why bother? Don't let it get to you. Meanwhile, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to finish up on the GOP and what they really need to be doing when it comes to Obamacare. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth, right here on Spreaker Radio.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back here at Tap Into the Truth. Thanks for coming back with us and staying with us through the break. We have been discussing why anyone should care what Jay-Z thinks. And while, of course, the title itself and the way I keep putting it might sound like it's disrespectful to Jay-Z, if you bother to listen to what I had to say, it's actually not so much. More of a plea to conservatives that are letting statements he's making riled them up so much to just kind of ignore it, because it's not any different than Jim Carrey and his little moronic tweets about gun owners shortly after the Sandy Hook incident took place. It's nothing. It's a low information guy who's surrounded by liberals and communists who just doesn't know any better. And why would you expect them to? But we're going to shift gears now. Before we do that, though, I do want to remind you, much like in the promo you just heard, please go ahead and follow the show here while you're listening. And after you're done following us here, check us out over at Blog Talk Radio. Show's spelled the same way, done the same way, a little bit different format there. Follow the show there as well. If you prefer, you can sign up and download our podcast from iTunes now. Both versions are available. Don't let it confuse you too much. One's Blog Talk, one's Spreaker. Go ahead and check out our website. I don't get to update it as much as I would like to, but we do make minor changes here and there, and occasionally major ones. We've got videos. Some are fun, some are educational. Stories, blog posts, links to the past episodes, both here and at the other show. And we do have a Friends of the Show page, which is designed to be links to take you to sponsors of the show and friends of the show. Again, let me remind you, our show coming up this Sunday on Blog Talk is going to be emotionally charged. For the first hour, we're going to be talking about the case of a young 13-year-old girl who was gang raped by illegal immigrants, eventually released, then was raped again after a person that she sought help from took her back to her apartment, and there was a nasty, mean old man there too. The gentleman in the second apartment happened to be black. The men in the first apartment, well, they all appeared to be Hispanic based on the descriptions, although only 2 people have actually been picked up to this point and charged, and both of them are illegals from Mexico. So why is the mainstream media not telling the horrible tragedy of this poor girl and what she's had to endure? Why do you have to hear it from people like me and other folks in the alternative media? Well, because it doesn't help sell the agenda, does it? It doesn't tell the narrative. And that's a shame. So please, I want folks to listen in. I want folks to call in. I want you to be heard. And then in the second hour, we're going to kind of open up the phone lines to the variety of topics from the past week. Everything from Anthony Weiner and the big debacle with his campaign for mayor, Detroit declaring bankruptcy, continuing situations, more fallout from the Zimmerman verdict, anything else that you basically want to talk about in the second hour, call in. We'll get into it. Had some great callers the last week, and we're hoping to improve it. Also, in a couple of weeks, although the details haven't been ironed out yet, we have tentatively agreed to have a gentleman from California on the show. He will be coming on. His name is Roy Pearson. He's running for Congress out in the 16th Congressional District in California. He's a truck driver who's just had enough. He's got some common sense conservative ideas based on the format that I've seen so far. He's agreed to come on the show, and we're going to talk with him for a while. Like I said, that is tentative at this point, so details haven't been finalized or worked out, but hopefully we'll be able to get that taken care of, hopefully before the end of the weekend. In the meanwhile, here's the deal. Right now, if you truly understand Obamacare and the mess that it is, you need to be all over your House of Representatives that are for your district. You need to be telling them right now. I don't care which party they are. You need to be just hounding the heck out of them and telling them, vote to defund it. Because here's it. If they don't do this now, Obamacare will be fully implemented next year. There'll be no bringing back. There'll be no step back. What you're going to have happen is they pushed back the start date. It's not happening right at the beginning of the year. No. They realize that this is still when everybody really gets a full taste and a good dose of what Obamacare does as far as raising premium rates, as far as reducing the amount of health care that you can afford instead of helping you. The Affordable Health Care Act, they named it that as a freaking joke. But there can be no spending. This is one of the few parts of the Constitution they haven't wrecked yet. Watch for them to try if this does happen. But at least for the moment, there can be no spending. No new spending, no spending of any kind that doesn't start in the House of Representatives. If the House will defund Obamacare, they will not be able to institute it, and this goes away. It becomes a meaningless law without the money they need to fund it. Of course, if this happens, you're going to hear the left start screaming, oh, we're going to lose firemen, we're going to lose teachers, we're going to lose doctors, we're going to lose whatever you're most afraid to lose. That's not true. Don't let them lie to you. The House of Representatives can easily fund everything else in the government and it not affect defunding of Obamacare. I don't care how many times in the past that the House of Representatives has voted to repeal it, knowing that it was a useless gesture and simply not going to pass in the Senate. All of that, it's nothing more than sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns to try and keep their constituents happy. Saying, see here, I'm on record voting to repeal it. And they can be on record voting to repeal it 100 times. But if they don't vote to defund it right now, then they might as well have been voting for it that 100 times. Because this is the only way that the House Republicans really have a way of stopping it. And you, ladies and gentlemen, you are responsible for getting in touch with your elected officials, and you need to be hounding them and let them know that not only do you expect them to vote no, but if they don't vote to defund Obamacare, you'll be working tirelessly to make sure that they are spending their last term in office. Make them believe it. The one thing that these people actually are afraid of is not being reelected. That's where you've got them. But you got to do it in numbers, and you have to do it like you're serious. Don't make threats. Don't go over the top. Don't get in trouble. But let them know the truth. Last 30 seconds of the show, so I guess it's time to sign out. I hope everybody enjoyed today's prime time edition. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, don't take my word for it. Definitely don't take their word for it. Take some time, do your own research. Think about it yourself. Sort through the minutiae, delve past the headlines, tap into the truth. Use your brain. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend, and don't forget to check us out this Sunday at Blog Talk. 2 hours, you don't want to miss it. Great weekend, everybody. Use your brain. Bye. Have a great night.